What's up, everyone? Welcome back. This is episode 3 of Dollar Bin Bandits. I am one half of your hosting team, Joe Marcello. With me always is Oren Phillips. Wave to the people, Oren. Say hi.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that Joe did the name of the show this week because, as you saw last week, I had been huffing gasoline for hours and forgot the name of the show. But I do it to keep you on your toes, and I'm glad that people, saw that I made a mistake. It just shows you're watching. So I will, do my best to correct that.
Thank you very much. This week, we have the pleasure of being joined by longtime friend and comic book encyclopedia, Allie Tarantino.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Congrats on getting this off the ground. And I'm really impressed how Oren just knows his strengths and weaknesses, and he just took a step back from announcing the title of the band here.
Things like that, they confuse me, and I get tripped up, and so I let a professional handle it. And I know my strength is just being the pretty face on the show.
Well, it's a clever title, and I like the topic, so let's go.
Well, I appreciate that. So let's start. How did it all start for you? Where did it all begin, comic book wise?
I don't remember not reading comics. From early on, my parents just surrounded us with books. I used to read Sweet Pickles. I still have all those. If you remember those commercials about Sweet Pickles.
Yeah.
Oren does. Do you, Oren? Do you really? I could quiz you on Sweet Pickles.
Was that those like little books?
Yeah, if I'm invited back for another episode, I'll do a whole Sweet Pickles.
Sweet Pickles.
But I read a lot. My parents got us like subscriptions to Marvel. We always had 2 comics we got. I was a Hulk guy and Spidey. We always joke around about how my brother was in kindergarten getting like subscription to Frank Miller's Daredevil. So that was arriving at the house. That's a whole other. He turned out the way he did because of that.
That's what it was.
I really, at the age of 48, I don't remember not having comics in my life.
Now, what drew you to because I remember you and I have known each other for 20 some odd years, and I was always kind of fascinated with the fact that, I was I was a mainstream kind of guy, like whatever Marvel DC put out, I got off of. But I remember you reading, a lot of more of the independent stuff, also, titles that weren't as popular, a little more dark, a little more mature. What sort of drew you into like the Vertigo line of DC as opposed to, some of the more mainstream stuff?
Yes. So reading comics, through the shooter era of Marvel and the post-crisis of DC. By the time I got to college, I kind of was like, well, I'm going to start to leave some of this behind. Like maybe I'll read like Marvel and DC in 20 years. This is like the, grunge era at this point. This is like grunge era Alley. So I'm like, yeah, I'll stop reading Marvel and DC for a good 20 years. And then, I'll just read all this, like you said, darker, more independent stuff. My friend Chris really got me into a lot of indie stuff like, Acme Novelty Library, Adrian Tomini. Those are all big names in the independent field. Ghost World, which became a film. So, that was some of it. Chester Brown, I'm a huge fan of, even though he's a bit of a controversial figure. But then, of course, as a big Grant Morrison fan of his American work, reading all his American work, and then I was in like a doctor's office and I saw an issue of Entertainment Weekly, and he was writing the Justice League. And I was like, Grant Morrison is writing the Justice League? So that kind of crushed my plans. I got back into DC and Marvel by the end of the 90s. So there was this period in the 90s, which is probably around the time when we met, where I really wasn't reading Marvel and DC at all. I was reading a lot of Vertigo and just a lot of small press stuff. I would go down to, what's the store that closed down on the Village?
St. Mark's Place?
St. Mark's. Used to go to St. Mark's a lot and just pick up, like in the back, they had all the small market stuff.
Right.
And would just like, feast on that.
Was there one particular, it doesn't have to be any mainstream or whatever, but was there one particular story, comic, character that really kind of caught your eye, jumped out at you, or that appeals to you back in the day?
Yes, so there's a couple of times when I was when I was in 6th grade, I walked this long distance to go to a stationery store to pick up Alpha Flight number 12 and Power Pack number 1. And like that's always like that's the moment you're searching for, is somebody who like does this their whole life. You're looking for that moment again, like because it still resonates with me. Like reading when Guardian died, and it was like, that's it, he's dead. Not realizing it's comics and he's going to come back 50 times. So as a kid, it was those 2 issues, and yes, Guardian does come back. Spoiler alert.
What?
And then I would say as an adult, it was, well, as an adult, I mean, I was like, 19 or whatever, but it was Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. I actually have the shirt on.
Nice.
So it was really that. And then that was, obviously a lot of people know that now from the recent TV show, which adapted a lot of Grant Morrison stuff. So I would really say, and I have some original art in the hallway of some of the characters like Cliff and Jane and Rebus and Chief. So it would be really those characters and just sort of the oddball nature of them. And I learned a lot of art history just from reading those comic books like that Grant dug into. So I would say those things.
Yeah,
Stand out.
he's certainly an interesting writer. I mean, I was kind of blown away watching Doom Patrol when they introduced Flex Mentallo. I was wow, all right. That's that was pretty cool. I mean, they really dug into that character, and I don't know, the way they portrayed him, I was like really blown away, because I didn't think it seemed like he was kind of deep cuts for DC Universe application for their streaming service, and they're going to go that deep into like Grant Morrison's world.
Well, and that early on too.
Yeah.
That early on in their whole franchise they were trying to build.
Yeah, but look, they got us. So mission accomplished. They did a good job.
Flex is a kind of funny story, because it's like the nature of your show is collecting, and I had missed the boat on getting Flex Mentallo number 1 when it came out, 2, 3, and 4 when they came out, but 1 I missed, and it was like it took me a couple of years to find it. And I remember being in New Haven, Connecticut, which was far away at the time. Now I don't live too far from New Haven, but I went all the way to New Haven and found a copy, like pre-internet, found a copy of Flex Mentallo number 1. It was like major victory.
Is that shop still there?
I don't know. I'd have to, I would know if I was there before, if I went to it. I'd have to look it up. Oren, you got to get on that for us.
I will crack that case right open. Yeah. I just want to know, like, when you were reading these comics, as opposed to the more mainstream stuff, did you see the sense that the writers had a lot more freedom, the artists had a lot more freedom to, go different directions? They didn't have to stay within a certain mythology or, storyline. They could just be whatever they want to be.
Yeah, I think that's what's so inviting to the writers and creators. They don't want to really necessarily create a new character for Marvel and DC, because then it's not, they're not going to reap the benefits when it becomes a movie attraction.
Right.
They'll basically like recycle a character that maybe doesn't have such a big, you're kind of seeing that with the Vision and Scarlet Witch, right. Who, like if you're working for Marvel, like do whatever you want with Vision and Scarlet Witch, whereas with Cap and Spidey, you have to do certain things, like you cannot do, but with other characters, you could do whatever. So I guess, yeah, that was probably a lot of the allure of these characters. It's like, Robot Man, sure, do whatever you want with him.
And we're kind of seeing that with the Suicide Squad film, using the old Charlton characters, Peacemaker and stuff being brought in and sort of giving a new life, and they can put their own spin on it because, who's going to complain, really?
Right. Peacemaker there's no Peacemaker fans out there. If they exist, they're lying.
Now that you put John Cena behind the helmet, now
right.
Everyone's going to be.
So now there will be lots of
everyone.
There will be lots of Peacemaker fans, but
rediscovering, yes.
Yeah, the greatest Peacemaker story is in connecting all the dots is the Grant Morrison Multiversity story from a few years back, which he uses. He kind of tells his version of the Watchmen, because he takes all of those Charlton characters. Right. And then does his own Grant Morrison take on them.
Yeah, I like how they finally incorporated that into the whole death metal finale.
Yeah, you could always see Morrison's influence because there's a lot of people who kind of, drink his Kool-Aid and tinker with as much of his stuff as they can. So even though when he writes it, it's its own part of the DC universe, eventually it kind of gets slowly integrated into what they're doing. So yeah, there was a lot of his stuff throughout metal or death metal or whatever they called it.
Yeah. What was your what's your take on kind of the state of comics now? I've been asking everyone, and I want to get everyone's opinion on it. Like, DC compared to Marvel, they both seem to be, they have their own, reboots every few years. And it's getting a little annoying. What's your thoughts on that?
So I've kind of moved out of the target market for modern music. So whenever I hear modern music, I'm like, I am too old for this. And I'm starting, I still enjoy, I go to the store weekly. I get a ton of books. Some of it is just my need to enjoy collecting, and reading it is enjoyable. I still find it enjoyable. A lot of what they do isn't for me anymore. But I still enjoy a good story. Like I just read King in Black 4, which I won't spoil it because it's not the right thing to do. But it actually,
that came out today, right?
Yeah, that came out today. But what Cates is doing with Venom, like a character that I really could care less about, he's recreated this whole mythology for Venom and connected him to a really cool character that doesn't have much of a history. So he took this fringe Marvel character and is connecting it to Venom, which was really cool. So, I could still enjoy things like that, like King in Black, but, sometimes it's a little fewer and far between.
Is that the Ditko character from the Marvel Spotlight comic?
Say that again?
Is that the Ditko character from the Marvel Spotlight comic that everyone was, you and I had?
It is a character that appeared in Marvel Spotlight in this issue, but it's not that character that you're talking about. Okay. I'll leave it at that.
Gotcha.
I don't want to get yelled at by.
Don't at Allie.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Ditko, I want everyone to hear the story of you, taking it upon yourself to find out his address, and as a young person writing to Steve Ditko, sharing your thoughts, stuff like that. And the fact of the matter, he wrote you back, and you guys had correspondence for a while. How was that, getting the first letter back from him?
So the funny thing is, I keep and collect everything, and I didn't make a copy of my first letter that I sent to him. Because I had heard that he writes back to people. You hear these things about him, like he doesn't take his picture, he doesn't do interviews.
Right.
He'll maybe talk on the phone for 30 seconds, but if you write him a letter, he'll write back to you.
Right.
So I looked up his address and found it. It was easy to find. And I got 5 letters back from him. I was probably my hands were shaking the first time I got the first letter, because I didn't remember what I wrote to him, and I didn't necessarily think he was going to write back to me, which is why I didn't keep a copy.
How old were you, by the way?
Oh, well, these were, you made it sound like I was a young person. These were this was 2014 to 2017. So
okay.
Neither of us was young in this. Ditko was old, I was old.
It wasn't like young Allie saying, Mr. Ditko, I really enjoy your...
Like a letter to Santa.
Yeah. No, he would have had no part of that. He would have been like, get lost, kid. You just want to talk about Spider-Man. That's not his thing. He's like, leave me alone. And the thing is, even though I only wrote to him 5 times, and I've read a lot of his his essays, you kind of know what's off limits and what he'll answer.
Right.
And you'll know what he would. Now, I have a good friend who's an art collector who has almost 20 correspondences with him.
Oh, wow.
He's got he's got a lot more stories than I do. But my favorite among them is what I call our breakup letter. To my handwriting, and kind of really focused on that throughout the letter. I mean, I could read it to you. I have a copy of it right here.
Yeah, please.
Funny thing is, so I have a couple of them. The 2 really good ones are framed, and just to kind of show you how in disarray I am, they're not even hanging right now. So I don't know how late.
Wow, cool.
He really gives you your money's worth.
Yeah.
And then he signs it and puts his name in print, which is pretty spectacular. As if you didn't know it was coming from Steve Ditko. He's got to print his name.
Right.
Now, did he start his breakup letter with "We have to talk"?
I think the breakup letter was the third letter.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
So there were 5. The third one was the breakup. The next 2 were just like really awkward.
Yeah. Can you guys talk amongst yourself for a second? I have to get something in this room.
Certainly.
Sure.
Da, 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 da.
We could always edit this part.
Yeah. Let's look at the stuff on his shelves. So we have
Yeah.
Hostess cupcakes. We have Iron Giant.
Oh yeah.
There's OMAC in the corner there.
Lights are fucking crazy, dude.
Sorry to give you some editing work.
Is that a Daredevil mug on the shelf there?
No, that's actually not a Daredevil.
Oh.
Iron Giant.
Well, I see Iron Giant.
The Hostess there, because you said you wanted to talk about Hostess, so that's why I had that there.
I was looking at the red mug.
Oh, that's just a devil mug.
Oh, okay. All right.
Come on, Jim.
This is just a Satan rat. I don't know if you could see this. Well, what's funny is I don't teach from this spot because I'm like,
no one will focus.
Distraction Central.
Yeah, it's Distraction Central, and then I'll get all these questions from parents like, "Why do you have like a copy of the Lost Girls up there?" And I just don't need that right now. So the letter,
mm-hmm.
My eyes are going on me. But then again, so were Steve Ditko's before he deceased. I shouldn't speak poorly of the deceased. All right, Dear Allie, this was published. He wrote this to me in February 8th, 2015. And I'll say this about him. He had a quick turnaround. Like you'd send him a letter and the guy probably received a lot of letters. So I'm imagining he spent a lot of, like there was probably a set amount of time during the day where he wrote these letters. Because I have friends, like I said, I know that he wrote a lot of letters. I'm not the only one who shared this experience. Dear Allie, I had a hard time reading printing, was tempted to give up on it and just return your letter. Like he's notorious for just like sending your letter back to you.
Right.
Now, I must have mentioned I was a teacher. I don't know where the original letter is. You're a teacher? Want safer cities? What about clarity of printing, communicating? You should have more respect for yourself. Would you need a superhero to improve your printing?
Wow.
Jesus.
It's a roast.
This is, yeah, I mean, I gave him a little bit of information and he just tore into me. Change is an inevitable part of life. That's a theme in a lot of his letters. The universe is eternally changing, evolving. One has to adjust to the times, changes, and not expect the universe to adjust to your or someone's likes, dislikes, or enjoyment. Regards, Steve Ditko.
Wow.
So, I took that as a severe breakup letter, so I had to write back to him.
Mm-hmm.
With
baby, it's not
lots
like
of apologies. Like it was smothered in apologies. But one thing that he said to me though was, this is an interesting one. It shows you like what he thought of his work because like, when he left Spider-Man, that was it. Like Spider-Man was dead to him. And Oren mentioned the Charlton characters earlier, which of course became the Watchmen characters and are now part of DC. So they were in that Multiversity issue I mentioned. And I remember making color copies of them because it had like the Blue Beetle,
the Question
Maker, all these characters that he was involved in. And I sent him like, hey, what do you think of these characters? And part of the letter he wrote back was, the included story, art, and pages have gone beyond my familiarity with what is done in comics today. Just didn't want to be on record saying, and
wow.
not like, I'm so proud these characters I created are in somebody else's hands these days. It's just like he wanted no part of it, dead to him.
Wow.
Now, what was it? Because, when he started out initially, it was before your time, in the 60s and stuff like that. How did you get, into him? What was it that caught you about his work and his writing and his whole philosophy?
So prior to like sort of getting anything in a graphic novel or on an app, you had to rely on things like Marvel Tales to get your hands on like early Spider-Man.
Right.
So again, that like really formative middle school time, the Marvel Tales reprints were all like the Ditko issues.
Right.
So like I have a big pile of those. Not as much the Doctor Strange stuff. I mean, I read that later on. But it was really more of the Spider-Man stuff. And then when you know, when you look at all of his other stuff that he did for other companies, like this is a great one, Creepy. You were just holding up some. Creepy Presents, Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
Like when you look at a lot of this stuff, you know, and you say to yourself, wow, this is the guy who created Spider-Man and like the look of him. But then, you know, Spider-Man, Peter Parker really become the Peter Parker that everybody knows, like when he left, really.
Right.
As much as I love Spider-Man, I don't know that if he stayed for 100 issues that he would have reached the level he did once Romita took over.
Right.
And I'm clearly in the Ditko camp, but, you know, Romita's drawings of like Mary Jane and Peter Parker really makes Spider-Man even more formidable. Sorry.
Now, what besides Spider-Man, what are some issues or stories or runs he had in different comics that you would recommend to people that kind of shows, okay, this is, you know, what else he could do?
So I brought a couple of things with me. These I got not too long ago. This is the first Creeper.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
And first Hawk and Dove.
Yep.
Yeah, he created a lot for DC, and then Charlton, the Charlton characters who then moved to DC.
Mm-hmm.
He also did, so Rom, if you remember Rom, the Space Knight.
Yeah.
Rom ran for like 75 issues and about 3 or 4 annuals while it was at Marvel, and connected, like Rom was a pretty popular character, if you remember.
Right.
You know, he appeared in like the X-Men, the Hulk. He teamed up with a lot of people, fighting the Dire Wraiths for 65 issues out of the 75. Here's what I love about this comic is it had that really terrible 80s coloring that really was like stood out. But there's a splash page in here where they're about to have this final conflict with the Dire Wraiths. And look at this front line. It's Cap, Beta Ray Bill, and Star Fox.
Right.
Second line, he's got Vision and Scarlet Witch there.
Mm-hmm.
Go Ditko. He knew they were going to be big.
You got Tigra.
But who's missing? I don't see Spider-Man anywhere. I mean, I could understand no Doctor Strange.
Right.
Like, I don't know, his comic might have been canceled at this point, but no Spider-Man?
It's busy, man.
This was a principled man. He wanted no part of Spider-Man. You weren't going to get him to draw Spider-Man at all. And then, of course, Speedball. You know,
right.
You can't go wrong with. You can't. And so the comic that I'm trying to get right now is the first Squirrel Girl.
Okay.
I've been looking for that since before she became big.
Right.
Before she became big, it was tough to find because there's not a lot of copies of it. But now that she's big, it goes for like, you know, $100. But
jeez,
we'll find it somewhere.
Now, is that still being worked on to become a property, movie, show, something? Because I remember reading, must have been a year or two ago, that was something that was being, you know, developed like any other comic book property nowadays. But it was starting to gain some momentum, and I think they had someone in mind to play Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, Marvel's lying low with her. They're you know, the second or third volume of her comic ended about a year or two ago. Mm-hmm. There's no plans for her right now, so maybe they're waiting for some of the TV thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible. That was really his last character. I think that was his last character he created for them.
Okay.
For Marvel. It's quite a resume.
I was going to say, like, you look through, especially, you know, the Charlton stuff, the horror comics, and then, you know, the superhero comics, and then jumping to DC, you know, did he write Stalker, or did he just do the art for Stalker?
Well, the crazy thing about Stalker is that I think it was, I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, Wally Wood was like the inker.
Yeah.
So it's like this crazy combination of Ditko and Wood
doing,
I don't know if it was just the first issue. I have those stashed somewhere.
Yeah, a couple of them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Oh, that was another one. He did the Hulk issue, the last issue of the original Hulk run with the Metal Master, and that was a comic that really stood out to me. I think that was the 6th issue.
Okay.
And if you remember, they used to turn those into like those cartoons where they took the art from the comic book.
And they just put it.
And it was that really freaky issue where the Hulk is the only reason I keep looking around is because I have some of this stuff out. The Hulk, because I was reading it not too long ago. I actually did have it. I knew it was nearby. So the funny thing about this is there's a moment in the book where the Hulk when he turns into the Hulk, he has Bruce Banner's head. So like that's quite a conundrum, right? Because he's like, he doesn't want anybody to know that Bruce Banner is still the Hulk. But he does happen to have a Hulk mask flying around.
Wow.
That's
now this is Ditko's Hulk is very different from Kirby's Hulk.
right.
And I'm not going to compare the two of them because they're both giants. So then it gets to the end where like he gets knocked out in the arm. He's like, look, it looks like he's wearing a mask. Yes, he is. And they take the mask off and he's turned back into the Hulk. So I had a reprint of this, not this. I had another reprint because I don't have the original of that. But like that to me was just like hook, line, and sinker, man. I'm a Ditko guy. Sold. But yeah, it was books like that that really kind of just drew me into the whole, the whole world.
Right.
The whole world.
The other thing I want to get into is you pointed out before, you and I spoke and you put together this, to me, like a beautiful mind kind of essay with Captain Marvel and the Hostess comics that were inside the comic books. Could you just go into that a little bit about the research you did and what you came up with? Because I read it, I was like, wait, what?
Well, I also want to say that if I could turn into my own spin-off, this would be like the Fonz and Mork.
Yes.
Pointing that out. In this situation, you guys would be like the Fonz, and one of you would have to be Potsy.
Nice.
You could fight over that. And then I could be Mork, and then have my own spin-off, modern day.
Show.
Yeah, so I belong to a couple of book clubs, we'll call them. One of them used to meet in person until this pandemic that's still going on, I think. And then the other one is sort of a digital one, which has people like from all over the country, just these random fans of comics from all ages too. We got like a pretty wide gap of ages. So you get like a good range of comic experience. And so what we'll do is we'll get these different assignments that we do. And since the pandemic, I've been pretty bad at participating in them. But one that we did was around the time of, I think the Captain Marvel and Shazam movies came out around the same time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So the assignment was like, read a Captain Marvel or Shazam comic and then report back to everybody on it. So I was like, how could I approach this? And then I remembered the Hostess ads. So let me, if I put it here, do you have to pay more now for this?
Yeah, it's product placement, but we'll get some,
right.
Hostess.
We'll blur it out.
So the 1975, part of my research, it was Our Army at War, number 279. And the reason that comic is important is because it was the first comic book in 1975 or any other time that had a Hostess cupcake ad in it.
Okay.
And so what I did is there's a database. It's like somebody had enough time to create this entire database from all the comic books from 1975 to 1982 when the last comic ran with a Hostess ad, Action Comics 529. And they had a whole database of I could share with you guys at some point of here's Captain Marvel, here's Superman. He had a lot of appearances. He was a Hostess cupcake king. But Marvel's Captain Marvel had 9 appearances. So I decided my comic book write-up would go from the Hostess cupcake era Captain Marvel into The Death of Captain Marvel, which is like, one of the greatest comic books of all time.
Jim Starlin, yes.
But it was such a, like the thing is when you were a kid reading those, it was like an extra page of comic. Like, you thought that those were like, it was like a legitimate side story.
Right.
When you read them as an adult, it's like, obviously you could see what their intent was. But it was funny because like, it was always these kids who were like, had bad eating habits, weren't very active, and were always like somehow involved in like some world ending plot. And then Captain Marvel wouldn't use any of his weaponry or powers, but he would just throw Twinkies at these mad scientists. Like that would be it. So yeah, I had a lot of inferences in this write-up, which doesn't exist online. I'll have to post it on my old comic website. But there's one episode where there's like this, they're at an amusement park and this big floating mouth is just with arms is like flying around. And it's like all of these, puns on mouths and teeth and smiles. It's like super corny. And then like he's at a flea market and these giant fleas attack. It's like, what a coincidence. Like, what is, So it was just taking this absurd part of Marvel. Cause like, you have to realize the original art exists for these. So like, these are an art collectible. Like somebody owns the original arts of these Hostess Cupcake ads.
Yeah.
Which boggles my mind. But then I went into like the Death of Captain Marvel, which is like, unlike Guardian who came back, Captain Marvel, and Uncle Ben are really the only two that haven't come back.
Right.
So that
Marvel hasn't come back at all.
Well, they've done some loophole kind of things. Like we thought he was back. He was a Skrull.
Oh, okay.
Like sort of time traveled and hung out with Carol. But he's never come back from cancer.
Right.
Which would kind of be, I was kind of upset at Marvel when like Aunt May had cancer and then they didn't kill her.
Right.
Because it's like, like the thing is cancer really kills people.
Right.
And we haven't figured out a way to beat cancer. So I don't think you should, I don't think you should let these characters, if they get it, beat it. So I'm glad they've kept.
So what, I don't want to interrupt you, but you make a good point. What about what's her name in Thor? Jane Foster. She had cancer. Correct. And every time she turned into Thor, it just enhanced. It actually made her cancer more aggressive until the point she was on like basically death's door, and for all intents and purposes dies. And I think she goes to Asgard or Valhalla or what have you. And I don't remember the exact course of events, but ends up getting better and becomes the new Valkyrie. Yeah, I was just reading. So Thor is actually, now that Donny Cates, I'm like plugging Donny Cates' work. She was just in a new issue of Thor. Yeah.
So was Throg.
Yeah.
Comic. Yeah, so I'm glad you appreciated that. It was fun to do that write-up. We have a pretty active group right now. The last project was a comic that has to do with like voting. I didn't participate in that one. Between work and the pandemic, and
it's hard to find the time.
Reality is just too overwhelming to be writing a lot about comics right now.
So how does that group work? You guys kind of decide on what's going to be. You guys pick something to read and discuss it, or just kind of throw out your ideas?
There's a weekly, and again, I haven't been really active that much lately. There's a weekly, there's always a weekly thread of what came out in that particular week. Mm-hmm. So right now, like a lot of conversation about future state, people are generally enjoying that, which a lot of us went into it with low expectations, but it has exceeded those low expectations. And then there's a few people who have certain roles without realizing it. There's somebody who gives us a lot of insight into a book that might be really hot. Like, you should think about getting a copy of this, even if you don't regularly pull it, because it's going to be a hot comic. Or we have somebody who just gives us a lot of advanced news of projects that are in the works for TV. And your last guest, George, is a key member of this because he kind of helps us with moving things along and You know, he has that history with Titans Talk of
Yes.
just that comic community.
Mhm.
I was never a big like comic, like all the shops I went to, I really just went there. I hung out and talked to the owner of the shop, but I wasn't this big comic community fan where I hung out with a lot of people from the store. Whereas other people are. So this is that for me. This kind of scratches that itch where I get to hang out with like-minded people, you know,
Now,
and enjoy Hostess cupcakes.
Look at that.
Just eating that in the morning. Talking about dollar bins, I know you are also a dollar bin bandit, just like us. What are some of the top books you've ever pulled from the dollar bins? Ones that you're sort of like, okay, how did this just happen?
Yeah, there's a lot of regrets. And I just tell you, as a kid, I loved Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I could have bought his first appearance, not the one that like the real first appearance,
None.
but the one in Epic or whatever the magazine was, but like his first appearance in the Marvel Universe. And I
Right.
didn't buy it. I mean, I have a copy of it.
Mhm.
But there's definitely a regret of not getting it. But, you know, it's just filling in holes, finding, you know, going to a convention
Mhm.
and just coming back with like a big pile of books that you spent $1 or $2 on. Most of the conventions now don't really have dollar bins anymore. They jacked it up to $2.
Right.
The places that do sell them for $1 at a convention, it's like doesn't come with like a bag and a board maybe. So who knows how many people mangled that one. But comic shops will still do those. So it's still really fun to just kind of find like something like I was looking for the last issue of the original Machine Man series a couple of years ago. And it actually goes for like, it's got a Frank Miller cover and it's the first appearance of Jack-o'-lantern.
Okay.
But it's also the last issue of the original Machine Man series. And I didn't have it. And I found that at a convention in a $1 box.
Oh, wow.
I was like overjoyed because it filled a couple of things. A, I needed it. B, it was worth more than the $1 it was. So that was pretty cool. That was a good find.
Wow.
So yeah, whenever you can get something, and some of the stuff you post, like you got the Alan Moore Superman issues, if I
Right.
remember correctly.
For the
Those
dollar.
are awesome to find. Even if they're low grade, those are great to find.
Right, just to get them like that. Yeah, I mean, it seems like some places now, I guess that just to draw in more business, they're, you know, they know people don't have a ton of money, so they're having more dollar bins, more things like that. Because, you know, it's, if you're on a tight budget, it's hard to go looking at the more expensive books, you know, or trying to get things that are graded and stuff. So if you can get it beat up a little bit, or, you know, anything to drum up business, you know, I think it's a good thing for the industry.
Yeah, so the shop that I go to, Oh Yeah Comics,
Mhm.
should check it out if you haven't. I know you guys have.
In Harrison, New York.
Yeah, great store. Mark is the best. And he's
Mhm.
been taking in a lot of collections because people are unloading their collections
Right.
because of the times we're in. And sometimes when a store, even in good times, when they buy like a big long box, sometimes they might be buying it for 1 or 2 comics.
Right.
They're gonna buy the rest of those comics in there. They're gonna spend like maybe a dime on those, maybe a quarter. So selling them for $1, they still make a profit.
Right.
So it's still a good way for them to like, you know, scoop up money. And for us, and then the thing is like, if you go to that store and you pulled those for $1, you're gonna keep going back.
Oh yeah.
You know, when Mark had one sale, he was telling me some of the stuff that he put in there on purpose.
Right.
You know, like some legitimate first appearances. And I went out there like trying to find it. He's like, "Did you find any?" But didn't find the key first appearances. But I'm on to him. So the next time he does it, I'm going to get there earlier.
That's the plan, man.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like it. You know, just going through boxes, and sometimes you get something. Like I bought a Marvel team up with Brother Voodoo. I was
Okay.
so excited I found it, and then like I went home and organized it with my Marvel team ups, and I had it already.
Yeah.
I was like, I must have just like relived that buying it out of a, you know, a small.
I think Orrin and I went through a similar thing recently, digging through the what is it, the back storage unit of that antique shop, flipping through stuff, and I'm like, oh, this looks
Yeah.
good, this looks good, and you bring it home. There was a few that I had.
Yeah. But it's not bad to have doubles. I mean,
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
push comes to shove. Are there any titles that you've discovered going through dollar bins that maybe at the time you weren't that, into, but you're like, for a buck, let me pick it up, and you're kind of pleasantly surprised about, the book?
Gosh, I'm trying to think of something that stands out. That maybe turn. Yeah, so I did find a couple of years ago. I found a bunch of Son of Satan comics. He's over here.
Okay.
I have a custom Son of Satan figure, and I had known him from the Defenders, but didn't have any of his solo adventures.
Right.
So I found a bunch of his comics, which now I think he's got a show too now on Hulu.
Okay.
I haven't watched it yet.
Hmm.
Yeah, him and his sister, Satana. It's not called Son of Satan and Satana.
I won't look that one up.
The name of it.
Maybe down a
It's on
dark
Hulu.
road.
But yeah, I would say he's a character who I came across and got like a big bundle of his stuff in like a dollar bin.
Okay.
So that was yeah. But a lot of times it's really just filling holes at this point. You go to like a show or a store with a big list. Now I have it on my phone, my list here. Like I was finding copies of Dazzler that I needed.
So you're the guy who buys them.
I'm the guy who buys them, and I was the last one I needed was Bill Sienkiewicz was doing the covers.
Right.
And he did this really cool Dazzler dressed like in Thriller, like Michael Jackson Thriller. It's like a riff on Michael Jackson Thriller. And that one was a hard one to get. And I don't like to rely on like an online entity to get it. I like to find them out in the field, but sometimes you just give up. And that one I finally had to just cave in and get it. And then what ends up happening is once you do that, you find them everywhere. Like that happened to me with an issue of Commandy, like the Commandy issues with like the Superman uniform. And I couldn't find it, finally found one. And then I saw it at a convention for like $5 and I bought it just on principle. I was like, I'm buying this book here because I needed to find it. But the Dazzler cover is really cool. I think it's 33. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if you'll be able to see that.
Oh yeah,
That's pretty cool.
And the funny thing was, like, I met Sienkiewicz, who's like a super nice guy. He's had a really cool booth the last Comic Cons, and I was talking to him, trying to make conversation, and I said to him, I hadn't found the book yet. I said, I need Dazzler number 33. It's the only Dazzler one I need. It's the Michael Jackson cover. And he was looking at me like I was trying to get his help to help me look through long boxes. Like that's how I was.
You
like,
start over there.
I know you don't have it. I said I'm just looking for it. I was like, if I find it, I'm going to come back and get it signed by you.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't find it. I got that one on. But Dazzler was easy. You could still get you could get this in a dollar bin.
Right.
Run to the dollar bin, get this one.
I would say get ROM, as much ROM as you can now, both for your computer and the comic. No, because I was reading a few years ago that they were trying to create a whole, another one of these shared universes with Transformers, G.I. Joe, ROM, and Micronauts.
The Micronauts, yeah, the Micronauts. Yeah.
I don't know.
It was tough for me to get into. I had the first series when it was just ROM. I think it was like 15 issues, but it was tough because like the fun part about the Marvel series, which like I said was 75 issues, is he like hung out with like Alpha Flight. He hung out with The Thing. He connected with a lot of groups. And like when he was in his own universe, it was like, eh.
Right.
And then they tied him into like the other ones, which worked a little bit. But I stopped reading it. Sorry.
You put your foot down on that one.
Sorry, IDW. I like their work. IDW's fun. They have all those licensed comics, but I just was like, I couldn't get into ROM at that point.
Yeah, IDW's getting me in trouble because I keep buying all the toys of all the crap that they start making.
Yeah.
Like, Transformer, Ecto-1, and Back to the Future, DeLoreans that transform. It's like,
Well, it's great, yeah. And going back to like, I remember being in middle school and hearing about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the first time. And like my brother and I got a copy of number 3, which is technically his. So like we've been joking around about like, you got to sell that Turtles comic. But like they're still, I mean, I think they finally just had their first female turtle.
they have some pretty good stories going
yeah,
on.
they're still going
Turtles.
strong.
Like there's one, it's the title. I'm bad with names and titles, so I'm going to get it wrong.
Is it
But
Ronin?
it's like, yes, yeah, Ronin.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's popular right now.
Yeah, but it was,
Yeah.
it basically it takes place in the future, and all but one of the turtles are dead, and I think it's like Michelangelo that's still alive, and he's missing one eye, and he's trying to carry on the fight, all the others and everything like that. It's I read the first issue; it was pretty good.
Yeah, no, they G.I. Joe still on the original continuity, still written by Larry Hama. So they've got like, they got great, but you have to draw the line. Like when you're buying a lot of stuff, there's something like the line for me with ROM was with the Micronauts and Transformers.
That's like, tapped out.
It's just too much.
So I wanted to ask, are there any titles that you, new titles that you were reading that you could recommend that are outside of the, the mainstream?
Yeah, so mainstream covers a lot now, because Image I would consider mainstream. At one point we would have considered them like independent.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, they're like the best publisher. But they're doing a great series called Crossover right now.
That's exactly what I was just thinking of that, and I wanted to ask you about it. Yeah.
Yeah, which
really
is
like it.
It's such a good series, and I just messaged my brother earlier that the 4th issue is next week to remind him that it's coming out. Issue 3, again, Donnie Cates. Issue 3 had a really cool appearance from a legendary independent character. So I would say Crossover is just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the Black Hammer universe by Jeff Lemire.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is
really like
fantastic. He told the main story, but now he's kind of branching out and he's kind of creating his own comic history with characters that are like analogs of characters that we know really well. So the Barbalian series is about to wrap up, and he's got other people, like Jeff Johns is going to do a Black Hammer story next month.
Really?
Patton Oswalt just did one. So he's got other creators, and not all of them in the comics field, digging into Black Hammer. And Lemire's just phenomenal. Like, we were just discussing in our online group, one of his books called Underwater Welder, which I read a few years ago. And one of our members just recently read it. And it's really good for people who are dads to get their hands on this and read it. Because it's this guy who's going to become a first-time dad, and it's like the weight of fatherhood, and he gets into this sort of Twilight Zone experience. It's a graphic novel. It was originally,
Which one is that?
Underwater Welder.
Underwater Welder.
I mean, this is the kind of book that you'll read like every year because it'll remind you of like why you live.
That's a pretty good endorsement right there.
I actually need to read it because it's like, it's one of those like reaffirming kind of things, but in a creepy way. And Lemire also did a series called Royal City, which was heavily influenced by the 1990s, which had some variant covers that were riffs on album covers from the 1990s. And Royal City looked like it was going to be a book that he was going to do for like 40 or 50 issues. But then I guess because Black Hammer was so successful that he kind of wrapped up Royal City and was like, I'm just gonna run with Black Hammer. But Royal City, which is about 15 or 16 issues, is a really good, trade, probably 2 or 3 trades, I think, if it's 15 issues, right? That's about 3 trades.
Yeah.
That's another one that's really worth looking into.
Now, you've met a lot of artists through the years, do you have a top 5 of your favorites?
Well, if it's people that I, like when you go to the conventions a lot, one of the fun things is to kind of go in the artist alley, which is now like its own convention.
Right.
It's not really an alley anymore. It's like a whole separate showroom.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few artists who I regularly get work from, and it's just fun to kind of like, get either a sketch cover or an original piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the people that I've gotten original art from, Jim Mafood is a real favorite of mine. He's kind of got like a graffiti style, somewhat like Sienkiewicz.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a Son of Satan cover by him and a Immortal Hulk cover. I've got a piece by Jay Lee, who I'm a real big fan of, a Sandman cover. Mm-hmm. Franco, of course, from Oya Comics, who does all ages stuff, but is just like so awesome to deal with and such a, fun dude to talk to.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of someone else. Oh, Bill Walco, who we have come to know through George, does really awesome work. It's fun to deal with because he's like super quick and just awesome use of color.
Right.
So out of the people that I've kind of met, and I feel like I'm leaving out 1 or 2 people, but then in general, like people whose art I just like, Frank Whiteley, never met him, but he's just one of my favorites. He did Flex Mentallo, worked on a lot of stuff with Grant Morrison, Bill Sienkiewicz,
right.
And as a kid, John Byrne, but nobody has a good John Byrne story. Nobody speaks nicely of John Byrne. Actually, Franco has the best John Byrne story. He told me once. So one day I'll let him tell you. But yeah, every professional you turn, if you ever talk to a comic professional and you mention John Byrne,
right,
they'll always be like, they'll tell you a story. And it's never a good one. Never ends well for any. And Walt Simonson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
I would, we didn't get any original art from him, but I had this old, like, speaking of Throg, the Frog of Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
When Thor turned into him a long time ago, and they had like the comic shop ad of like the big Thor frog holding a hammer.
Yeah.
And like I got it from the old shop I was at, and I saved it because I save everything. And when we met Walt Simonson a couple of years ago, I think he was at the Action Comics signing.
At Oya.
At Oya. And we got the Action 1000 signed by him, and I pulled out the, it was like a fold out Thor frog thing. And he was like so psyched to see it. He held it up and showed the other art. He's like, check this out. Like, because he probably hadn't seen it in like 40 years or whenever it came out. And he signed it. So we got to hang that up. But that was cool. Like, he really genuinely appreciated that. John
awesome.
Byrne would have made some wise ass remark or something. What a loser. You still have this poster.
Moving along.
But speaking of time travel.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Talk about things that should be framed.
One of the coolest things I ever bought at Dragon's Den is the oversized 2001. But I came bearing gifts. So before we wrap up, I'll give you your gifts. So you tell me when the time limit's up, and then I'll give you your gift.
I say that 2001 is like a very popular book at this point. I mean, that's all Kirby, like just him going all over the place.
Yes. So, when you're on eBay, I don't really do the auctions, but I'll do the buy now stuff. And sometimes you can get like somebody who doesn't really know what they're selling, and they'll write something the wrong way and like undervalue it, but then other people don't see that it exists. So I got the whole set of 2001, the 10 issues, and they were in like amazing condition, and I got them for pretty cheap. All 10 issues. Like some of the single issues alone would have cost more individually. But I looked into that one and I scooped it up quickly. So I have a whole set of those. That's the first Machine Man.
Right.
Crazy stuff. So let me give you your gifts before you go.
All right.
I'll have to mail these to you because I might not see you for a while. So these are dollar bin extraordinaires for
Ooh.
Oren. What is this? Speedball number 8? Number 8?
The Bonehead Gang.
Yeah.
But Oren, that just had Oren written all over it, the Bonehead Gang.
It's like,
Now, I don't know if you have this. This is a Brian Boland cover.
Oh, wow.
that's pretty fresh.
Look at
That's
the
really
look at the
cool.
creative team. Loeb and Sale.
Jeff. Oh yeah,
All right.
that's great.
This is kind of like the challengers of the unknown Dark Knight. Like, this did for the challengers of the unknown what Dark Knight did for Batman.
Right. It made it legit.
Let that sink in.
Oh. You blew my mind, man.
Salivating here.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Well, those are awesome.
Good luck with this.
Thank you. I want to thank Allie for joining us, man, because I'm amazed at talking to you. Every time we discuss comics, I learn something. I take notes every time because I'm like, oh, well, I got to check that out. And what amazes me is the amount of stuff you collect is astounding.
Mhm.
And pretty much like everything that happens, like you retain it in some way, and you can probably find it pretty easily. So I'm wow, it's awesome.
Well, appreciate it. Good luck with this, guys.
Thank you.
If you ever
Thank
want
you.
to talk again, you know where to find me.
Oh
You
yeah,
certainly will.
If I get my Mork and Mindy spin-off, we'll have to do a crossover event.
we'll do
So,
it. And
I think my
Rich,
brother would be the Mindy part of that.
I was gonna
think
say
we
Rich
can.
could be Picky Tuscadero.
Yeah.
You both, right. And
All
if
right,
you like
guys.
what you see, like and subscribe.
Yes. Thanks, guys.
See you soon.
Thank you, Allie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.